Hey guys, it's Libby, and I'm coming to you on a very violent day. This is probably the worst weather we've had since I've arrived in Amsterdam. It's not raining very hard, but it is super windy, so you may hear odd sounds in the background. Also, I got a new shirt. I quite like it. It makes me feel like a companion of the Third Doctor. Where's K9? But today I'm doing the Victorian Literature Tag for Victober. This tag was made by Katie from Books and Things last year for the 2016 Victober, which I didn't realize was happening until like the month was half gone, so I didn't participate, and I didn't do the tag. But since this year I'm participating, I thought I would do the tag now. The first question is, what is the first piece of Victorian literature you ever read? I can't say for certain, but I'm pretty sure it was Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. I read this probably when I was 8 or 9. It was published in the 1870s, and it's presented as the autobiography of a horse, and it is a children's book, but it's a fairly serious intellectual children's book. It talks about the abusive way that horses were treated in the Victorian era, and also sort of problems with industries related to horses. Like there was some complicated law about set fares for cab drivers in London, which this book is sort of demonstrating the problems with. Question 2 is, what is your favorite Victorian novel? I've never properly set out and decided this before, but I guess I have to go with my favorite book by my favorite author, and that is The Woodlanders by Thomas Hardy. It's got a whole mess of characters being in love with each other, and it's all set up in Hardy's sort of fatalistic way where you can sort of feel the dread of how this is all going to work out. I was also really affected by the first scene, so it just won me over immediately. The first scene, you see a young woman, and she is debating whether to sell her hair for money because she's poor, but there's also this guy that she quite likes, and she has very nice hair, and she sort of wants to keep it so that she can win him over. And I have trichotillomania, which means I compulsively touch my hair, and that it destroys it. So you can see, whoa, my window just blew open. Auntie M, Auntie M. Okay, hopefully the ghost of Catherine Earnshaw didn't sneak its way in here. So yeah, I have trichotillomania. This does damage my hair, so you can see this front section is the one I touch the most, and it's shorter than the rest of my hair. So having emotional feelings about your hair, I can get behind that. The Woodlanders is so good. So then question 3, favorite Victorian author, Thomas Hardy. Then question 4 is your favorite literary couple. These are also Thomas Hardy characters, but they're not from the Woodlanders. They are from The Return of the Native, and that is Diggory Venn and Thomasin Yeobright. Diggory Venn is just literally the best person ever, and he's maybe magic. And considering all Thomasin goes through, she needs a man like Diggory. The Return of the Native also starts off with this sort of key difference to a lot of other early Hardys. So a lot of times, Thomas Hardy will spend a couple of paragraphs in the first chapter gazing at our heroine, either from the narrator's perspective or from another character's perspective. But at the beginning of Return of the Native, Diggory Venn is concealing Thomasin inside his wagon, so we get introduced to one of the important female characters of that book very differently than we get introduced to Thomas Hardy's other female characters, and the way we get introduced to the other main female character of The Return of the Native, Eustacia Vi, who we do gaze at in silhouette up on a mound. Question 5 is favorite Victorian villain. I had to think about this one a little bit because I normally don't super like stories with an external antagonist. I'm much more interested when the antagonist is inside you. But I finally landed on Hindley Earnshaw from Wuthering Heights. Now, I'm one of those people who doesn't particularly care for Wuthering Heights. I don't think it's terrible, and I understand why people like it. It's just not really for me. But I do think that there are some interesting interpersonal dynamics going on between Hindley and Heathcliff. So at the beginning, Hindley is pretty mad that his father has basically adopted another son, and he spends a lot of time making Cathy and Heathcliff's lives pretty terrible. But then as they grow up, it turns out Cathy and Heathcliff are pretty good at making their own lives terrible, and they have graduated way beyond what Hindley can do to them. But then, what with one thing and another, Hindley loses a lot of his money and he ends up having to like mortgage his house, Wuthering Heights, to Heathcliff. And then they're like both living in the house together and they hate each other so much. And there's only a couple of scenes where they talk to each other, but that dynamic, that's my favorite part of Wuthering Heights. Question number 6 is favorite Victorian book where someone dies of consumption. I'm pretty sure the only book I've read like that is Jane Eyre, so Jane Eyre. The next question is longest Victorian book you've read. Nothing immediately springs to mind. I haven't read any of like the stupid long ones like Middlemarch. So I'm gonna go over to Goodreads, sort by date published, and add number of pages. Okay, I'm scrolling through. Jane Eyre is 589 pages. Can anyone beat that? Oh no, that's Crime and Punishment. Russian, not Victorian. According to Goodreads, The Woodlanders is 0 pages. Pretty sure that's not right. Yep, okay, longest one's Jane Eyre. Question 8 is a Victorian author or book that you feel is underrated. I haven't actually read that many obscure Victorian works. The obscure 19th century stuff that I tend to read is from other authors. So I quite like Family Happiness by Leo Tolstoy, but he's Russian. I think the most obscure Victorian book that I've ever read is A Group of Noble Dames, which is a collection of short stories by Thomas Hardy. And it was interesting, but I wouldn't say it's like, oh my god, you've got to go read this. The second story, Barbara of the House of Grieve, I actually find incredibly disturbing. It's very much about psychological torture, and it's a little bit difficult for me to reconcile the fact that my beloved Thomas Hardy wrote such a disturbing book. It's not like condoning psychological torture, but it's just like showing it to you, and it messed me up for a bit. Question 9 is most beautiful edition of a Victorian book that you own. Give me a sec, I'll be right back. So I have the 2 Random House special editions of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, which were published in 1946. They have quite nice covers, and the special thing about the publication is that it included the original illustrations in full color. These also have personal value because they were originally given to my grandmother in 1946 by her dad, and then my grandmother gave them to me in 2002. Question number 10 is 3 unread Victorian books that you want to try. Now I'm going to combine this question with questions 11 through 15, which are favorite Bronte novel, favorite Dickens novel, Hardy novel, Gaskell novel, and Trollope novel. So I haven't read anything by Anthony Trollope, and I've only read some quite short things by Elizabeth Gaskell that I didn't love and don't super remember. So instead of giving you a favorite Gaskell or a favorite Trollope, I will give you the ones that I want to try by them the most. The Gaskell that I want to try is North and South, basically Pride and Prejudice with like workers' rights. I'm here for that. And from Anthony Trollope, I'm interested in reading The American Senator, which is told from the perspective of an American senator who is visiting Britain as an American living in Europe and experiencing these weird people. I can relate. And I also know that that book is sort of a comparison between 2 women, one of whom is sort of praised and virtuous, and the other one is not so virtuous and she's denigrated. But I'm pretty sure I'm gonna love the second woman. And then for the third unread Victorian novel that I want to read, that is Middlemarch. I think there's a chance that I will hate it, but a lot of famous writers think that like Middlemarch is the greatest novel ever written. So now I can properly answer questions 11 through 13. So my favorite Bronte novel, here's the thing. Am I allowed to like chop up the books? Because if I have to take the novels as a whole, Jane Eyre is my favorite. I have to mention that I haven't read Shirley or The Professor, but I have read all the other stuff. But if I'm allowed to like take bits and pieces, I really like the Gilbert sections of The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. So The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, you start out with a section narrated by Gilbert, and then in the middle there's a long section narrated by Helen, and then at the end you go back to Gilbert. And I love the Gilbert sections. I think the Helen sections are too long and repetitive and kind of boring. So if I'm like ranking Bronte novels, it definitely goes the Gilbert parts of Tenant of Wildfell Hall, then Jane Eyre, then Villette, then like tie between Wuthering Heights and the Helen parts, and Agnes Grey. Those ones are all just like fine. So count that however you will. Then finally, favorite Dickens novel. Now I haven't read that much Dickens. I read Great Expectations and Tale of Two Cities for school. Great Expectations I thought was fine. Tale of Two Cities I utterly hated. And then after school, outside of school, I have read Christmas Carol and The Mystery of Edwin Drood. I almost said The Murder of Edwin Drood. That's not it. And so I'm basically just deciding between those two. I'm gonna go with The Christmas Carol. I mean, it's less complex plot-wise. You have to accept A Christmas Carol for what it is. It's not verisimilitudinous. That's my word of the day. But if you can get into like the fairy tale nature of it, A Christmas Carol, it's not overrated, guys. It is actually good. So there we go. Victorian Literature Tag. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Good luck with your Victober plans, and I will see you later.